Indian army now says 20 Indian troops are dead following clashes with Chinese troops. It's the result of a very violent standoff along the de facto border in the Himalayas. It occurred during a de-escalation process in the disputed area. Sam Kiley is with me from Abu Dhabi. Sam, when I read the very idea of a clash between India and China along what is a controversial border, or at least a tense border, I mean, what went wrong here?
Well, Richard, as you were saying in the intro there, these clashes, so-called, followed what were supposed to be de-escalation negotiations between India and Pakistan over what's called the line of actual control, a border effectively separating the two countries but not recognised by either, running some 3,500 kilometres, mostly through the Himalayas. Now, periodically, in 1962, 67 and 75, there were clashes that led to fatalities, but not since 75 have things got this bad. Now, bear in mind that the Indians now are announcing, Richard, that they've lost 20 soldiers, including a lieutenant colonel, no less, all as a consequence of non-firearms injuries. In other words, the two sides, the Chinese and the Indians, and there are reported to be Chinese casualties, although we've reached out repeatedly to the Chinese authorities to get more detail on that. But the Indians are now admitting that they lost 20 men in hand-to-hand combat that was not involving guns. This was stones, rocks, cudgels, very primitive form of combat at this very high altitude, because it is such a potentially inflammatory area between what has now become, in 1975 the picture was very different. This year now, 2021, you've got a situation in which you have nuclear powers. Both countries are nuclear armed, both are much more powerful in the world economically, and both are beginning to flex their muscles across the region. With the Chinese, of course, we've got used to their efforts to expand their territorial waters in the South China Sea. But this area of the Himalayas is another contested area, and clearly these two very powerful nations are literally, it seems, been butting heads. The Indian authorities saying that a large number of these deaths, Richard, were followed injuries that were exacerbated by the cold and the very high altitude, Richard.